Have two more left. We have battled through almost every single division in the NFL, giving our predictions, one of our favorite things that we do here on the show. We're rounding it out strong. Last 2 weeks, this week, the NFC East. Here we go.
If you're new here, we always start at the bottom of the division and work towards the top. So we'll start in the basement with the Washington Commanders. Somewhere around 5, maybe 6 wins if Sam Howell ends up being somewhat decent.
I don't see them at all.
I don't see Sam Howell being that guy. To me, it reminds me a little bit of a Baker Mayfield. Kind of shorter, stockier, doesn't move as well as you thought he did coming out of college. Accurate, but not pinpoint. Good arm, but not great. Just a lot of very average. Now, I do think he's more
mature.
Upstairs he's more mature, right? And he's
yeah.
not calling out any medical stats. But then again, he also hasn't been under the microscope, so we don't really know 100%. And then you're hearing some stuff out of the building. Eric Bieniemy, talking a bunch of stick to the players, and Ron Rivera over the last 5 seasons as a head coach, going back to his time in Carolina, hasn't been a very winning head coach. So there's a lot of things working against them, and I do think the division's pretty strong. I'm not a huge New York Giant fan, and I don't think they're going to be very good. But even then, they're around 500. That's still a strong, gonna vie for the 7th seed in the playoffs type team. So I think Washington kind of gets lost in the wash, no pun intended here, and they end up being around 5-12, definitely last place.
Yeah.
You can debate the record, but I think it's fairly consensus that they are a last place roster.
I think one of the biggest things too that you have to take into consideration here, like you were talking about with the coaching, is the lack of it. There is no control over this team. Ron Rivera has never proven to have any control over drama in the locker room, media exploiting stories and getting stories that never should have gotten out.
Should not have been a story.
It's just a very leaky locker room, and that doesn't win in the NFL. Look around. Do you ever worry about Bill Belichick and the coaching staff there? No.
Kansas City.
Kansas City, you don't worry about
Even
it.
Pittsburgh,
Tomlin, you don't worry about it. I mean, you look around at the good, well-run franchises, and you don't find that.
Yeah, Baltimore.
Yeah.
That's why it was a little weird with the Lamar thing. That was the first time I think they've been in a very uncomfortable spot like that. So
I feel like they nipped it in the bud pretty well, though.
Also, one thing that everyone's gonna, I'm sure the comments will, Washington's defense is really good, and yes, they do have some talent, especially in the front 4. My concern is that
gets thin in the secondary.
Gets thin in the secondary. The linebackers leave a little bit to be desired as well. And at the end of the day, we go through all these teams and people are like, well, they have an elite defense. Well, you can only have so many top 10 defenses. You can only, you know what I mean? I feel like we're at a saturation point when you're like, oh, they have a top 10 level defense. And then you get to Washington and you're like, is it though? Is it? Because lately it's been more closer to 20 than 10.
Right.
But people want to throw that out there because they have Chase Young and a defensive head coach. They have an elite defense. Really? Because you go look at the other quote-unquote top 10 teams, and they're a lot less talented.
And look, Chase Young has been rumored to be being moved and leaving Washington so many times this offseason.
Trade deadline. If they're bad at the trade deadline, that's what I would.
He's going elsewhere.
I think so. 3rd place here, the New York Giants. Again, I'm not a huge buyer on the Giants, but I do think they're an 8-9, 7-10, 8-9 team.
At least competitive in almost every game.
Yeah, my concern is the players. Now, it's not going to kick in quite as much this year. They're going to be able to keep a lot of the same guys. But going forward, when Daniel Jones' contract starts to get a little bit bigger, right now you're paying Saquon. There was already an issue there. The offensive line still isn't good. Andrew Thomas, the left tackle, is fantastic. Evan Neal, as a rookie at right tackle, was not very good. The interior, not good at all.
Mm-hmm.
Wide receiver still leaves a ton to be desired. The front 7-ish, very good. Outside of that, not a ton to work with. And Daniel Jones not good.
It gets thin quick. I don't like Daniel Jones. I mean, he's always been, decent and good enough, not anywhere close to what they value him and what they're paying him. And like you said, it's only going to get worse. You already struggled to pay Saquon. What happens next year when Daniel Jones is getting paid even more and Saquon still needs a contract? Are you even going to be able to keep him? But for this season, I see them being competitive. I don't see them doing anything crazy. I don't see them setting the world on fire and winning a bunch of games that they shouldn't. I think they'll maybe steal a game here or there. But I think they're also going to play down to competition in 2 to 3 to 4 games. So it'll even out 8-9, 9-8 maybe.
At best.
But this team is a third-place team. It's a born-and-made third-place team.
I would agree. Now the top 2, which is pretty consensus top 2, we're in the camp that Dallas is going to be fairly average to slightly above average. And we think Philly's great. So I would go Dallas 11-6.
Yeah.
I do like Dak. I think Dak is somewhere between the 10th and 14th best quarterback, and I think that's very, very good. I think he's good enough to win you 10 games. The receiving core is good. I do worry if CeeDee Lamb rolls an ankle or goes down. Who's their number one? It's Brandon Cooks. I don't love that idea. Michael Gallup and Brandon Cooks, I don't love those being the 2 and 3. A lot of injuries, a lot of miles under Brandon Cooks, in his past. No Ezekiel Elliott. Tony Pollard, going back to college, has only had like 2 or 3 games with more than 20 carries. So he's not the bell cow back. You need somebody else. He's more gadget out of the backfield, explosive. I worry if he's got to get 25 carries.
We also have never seen anything from Dallas. I've heard so much hype for so long. It's at the point now where I'm like, look, I am not buying into this team until I see actual proof of that on the field. And I don't see this year being really any different. There's nothing new this year that wasn't there in the last couple of years for me to hang my hat on and say, you know what, Dallas is going to be able to maybe turn it around this year. I mean, you're in a division with 2 teams that are definitely significantly worse than you, just talent-wise on the roster. So, yes, you're going to finish above Washington. You're going to finish above New York. But now you have to compete with Jalen Hurts and the Eagles. But I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Right, but on the flip side, I think they win 10, 11 games because their defense is really good. And at the end of the day, Dak is an above-average quarterback.
Well, I
think those are the 2 main things that you need, and they have them.
And we have them splitting. So, just for reference, we have them splitting with the Giants.
I think we have them beating the Giants, splitting with Philly, I believe.
No. We have them. Do we? I thought. I don't know. What do you think about that? You think they beat Philly in Philly?
No, I think they beat Philly at home.
Is it really that much different of a game?
Yeah, I think it's
with that pass rush, after Dak like that.
I do think that they match up really well in division though. Philly's a tough matchup for them, but they do match up really, really good with New York.
Okay.
So I don't know. We'll see. All right, number 1, the team that we think is great. I think is going to be very good. Now I do worry them losing their 2 coordinators, Philadelphia at 13-4. I worry about them losing both offensive and defensive coordinators. That's tough. Shane Steichen has been really, really good.
Yeah.
We saw when Josh Allen loses Brian Dable. Well, how is it now?
A bit of a regression.
Right, and even Justin Herbert, who still it seems like he's growing. I do think that jump from what he was while he had Shane Steichen, that development, he hasn't reached that type of development. I think he would be still better with Shane Steichen. Shane Steichen has been a fantastic quarterback development guru and offensive coach. He's now out of the building. Nick Sirianni's calling plays. Go look statistically when he was calling plays. The offense is not the same. They dip about 50 yards a game. I think it's 4 points per game. And they win less. So it's something. I don't think it's everything because I think at the end of the day they have the most talented roster in the division, and I think they have the second most talented roster in the NFC. So at the end of the day, they're still going to be very good.
Yeah.
I worry about the ceiling now.
I think
they're going to be good enough to beat almost everybody except for that top tier, the San Franciscos, Kansas Cities, Buffaloes. I worry there.
I worry about the coaching losses for sure. I think that's probably the biggest negative that you have coming out of this offseason, right? Because everywhere else, you either stayed the same or got better. I mean, they killed the draft. They won the draft in our opinion. I mean, nobody drafted like the Eagles did. Nobody did.
It was up there for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the steals that they've gotten, and even in the years past, last year with A.J. Brown,
just shopping at Georgia.
So, I mean, it's a great place to shop if you're looking for defensive players, too. Either way, this team is going to be very good. They're going to be the best team out of the NFC.
You think so?
I think they're going to
better than the Niners.
I think they're going to be better than the Niners. And outside of that, it's really tough to start finding guys, other teams and organizations in the NFC that will be able to compete with Philadelphia. Because they added so much talent. I love Nick Sirianni.
I'm gonna ride with the Niners over them though.
Okay,
just throwing that out there. Now the Niners might not have the better record in in the regular season, but I think the Niners come out of the NFC this year.
Interesting.
It's very interesting. Brock Purdy's gonna be playing in the Super Bowl.
Depends how that quarterback situation shapes up.
Yeah, we'll see.
All right, take us back down.
All right, so we got Philadelphia at number 1, 13-4, Dallas at 11-6, the Giants at 8-9, and Washington at 5-12 to round out the NFC East.
That is the NFC East. Going to be a great division. It usually is. I mean, even when we thought it was going to be like a tire fire of a division, like it was what we predicted that 2-3 years ago, it still ended up being at least somewhat competitive. So never go wrong with those teams there.